Hi everyone, Ben Dinnery from Premier Injuries here with another Premier League preview. Just quickly going over some of the key talking points in terms of injuries ahead of game week 12. Cardiff City got us underway in the early kick-off. Neil Warnock has bemoaned his injury luck, and says that the difference between the likes of the Cardiffs of this world and the Manchester Cities and the Manchester United is squad depth. And the Bluebirds are down to maybe 17 or 18 first team players that he can call upon, and they'll be looking for a big win, hopefully going into break with 3 points under the belt. The Manchester Derby takes place on Sunday, and Jose Mourinho will be hoping to keep his unbeaten run at the Etihad alive. United are unbeaten in 3. They've won twice and drew 1 on the last 3 visits, but they will need to be at their best to take anything away from a City side who've been in fine form. For Pep Guardiola, team news is good. Ilkay Gundogan and Nicolas Otamendi returned to the matchday squad in the Champions League. That effectively meant that Kevin De Bruyne was the only significant absentee from the squad at the moment. He's nursing a knee injury. Of course, we've got Claudio Bravo with a long-term Achilles problem, but he's nothing more than a backup to Ederson. But for visitors, Mourinho's got a number of problems, and I'm going to touch upon those now. So news broke late on Friday afternoon that Paul Pogba didn't train with the main group, and he's basically been given one more session to prove his fitness. And for me, I don't really see this as a big concern. I actually think Paul Pogba will be involved, and I'm tending to agree with Jose Mourinho on this point. During this morning's press conference, he said that there had been no sort of major injuries picked up in Turin against Juventus in the Champions League midweek, but he did have what he called 1 or 2 touches. And by touches, what I interpret that as being sort of minor knocks and niggles. I think you can class maybe the Alexis Sanchez thigh injury in that, which was a dead leg. He trained fully on Friday, and also I'm putting sort of Paul Pogba in that as well. Like I say, he was still working. I think it was in the gym, but away from the main group, and I fully expect him to be okay to work on Saturday and be included in the Derby squad on Sunday. And similarly, Romelu Lukaku could also return to the matchday squad. He was a surprise omission from the game down at the Vitality, and it was reported at the time as a muscular stroke tendon problem, although the striker would be assessed over the next couple of days. He was one that did miss out against Juventus, and again the information from the club was quite sparse. There wasn't a great deal to go on, but on Friday I think they're talking about Mourinho's got his mojo back. He was quite jovial this morning. I do like these Friday morning press conferences, as opposed to the ones on late on a Friday afternoon. And what he said was Lukaku is training, so he's back with the group. He had 2 sessions to prove himself, and if he does, he's in the squad. Now, for me, as long as he doesn't suffer any setbacks, I would expect to see him, named in that match day 18. Whether he starts or not, I think given his recent form and given how Man United have performed in the last few games, I think any involvement will probably be from the bench. So first up, I'd like to talk about Richarlison. Now, the Brazilian striker has been flagged as a doubt by Marco Silva during Friday's press conference. Richarlison rolled his ankle in the first 20 minutes of last week's game with Brighton. After lengthy treatment, there were concerns, whether he'd be to continue or not. He actually did, and he completed 90 minutes, and he scored twice in that game. However, post-match, Marco Silva revealed that Richarlison had been playing with a lot of pain in his foot, and that he would be assessed over the next sort of 24 to 48 hours to determine the extent of the damage. There have been no sort of official updates from the club. Everton played a friendly on Tuesday night, which he wasn't a part of. So the first sort of news and updates that we had came today from Silva, who basically confirmed that, you know, Richarlison is still struggling with the ankle problem. He hasn't taken part in any full sessions. He hasn't been training normally, and he's been doing a lot of individual one-to-one work with the physiotherapists. Now, he didn't go as far as ruling Richarlison out of the game completely on Sunday, but what he did flag him as a doubt, and quite rightly so. You know, he wants to give the Brazilian every opportunity to prove himself. So he's going to take another look at him on Saturday and make a bit of a judgment call there. And this is a very similar scenario to what we had with Eden Hazard back in game week 10 with Chelsea travelling to Burnley. You know, decisions are going to be made after the FPL deadline, which isn't a great deal of help to managers. However, I do see some subtle differences in the Hazard and Richarlison sort of injuries. And the first and the most obvious one is, you know, we're heading into an international break now. And what that means is, you know, effectively, if Silva does decide to risk Richarlison, then he's got a couple of weeks to recuperate and recover before game week 13. And there's also, as well, we talk about, you know, the ankle injury as opposed to the back with Hazard. You know, that was a bit of an ongoing issue. You know, I would like to think that maybe, you know, the ankle problem, the roll could be taped, it could be strapped to minimise, you know, the mobility around the joint. And you know what, I can see Richarlison actually being involved on Sunday. Like I say, it's a big call. It might be a little bit of a risk and a leap of faith here on my behalf, but I have to remain optimistic because I'm a Richarlison owner. And judging, I've got a few other concerns and doubts in other positions, and I'm not keen on taking any hits for transfers. So for that, I'm going to say Silva will risk Richarlison from the start, and then hopefully he can sort of run out at a minimum of 60 or 70 minutes. Eddie Howe's definitely off Fantasy Manager's Christmas card list so far this year. The Bournemouth manager has a tendency to throw in a few curveballs this season. Ryan Fraser being the obvious one that springs to mind. And heading into this weekend, we're also, doubts with regards to Josh King and whether the striker can play up at St James's Park on Saturday. Now, King's been managing an ankle problem since the last international break that he picked up playing for Norway. And it was an issue that looked to have been exacerbated when he was back at the club, which caused him to miss out last weekend. With no sort of timeline on when he could potentially return to play, although Eddie Howe did say that it certainly wasn't serious and he didn't think it would be a long-term problem. During the week, Josh King had been speaking to a Norwegian outlet, and he referenced the problem as a special little injury, and he rated himself as 50-50 heading into the game at Newcastle. And those sentiments were echoed by Howe on Friday morning. He actually said that King had trained with the squad. Now, I've been looking through the training photographs, and by all means, you know, that's not the gospel. They're just a brief sort of snapshot. But I've seen a couple of the group stills of everybody together, and King certainly wasn't a part of that. And that was on Thursday. And bear in mind that his press conference was first thing on a Friday morning, 9 o'clock, and he said he had been training now. So I'm not really sure what to take of that. For me, I think Josh King probably misses out. I think if he did play, then he's away with Norway again, and there are issues there. So I think just by holding him back for another week, that gets him off the international hook, and it gives him an opportunity to fully recover and be fit heading into game week 13. And you consider maybe the form of Callum Wilson as well. He's going to be buzzing off his England call up. you know, he's on fire at the moment. So I think for that reason alone, you know, you've got the likes of Stanislas as well, who's coming off the back of an injury, and you know he's closing in on full fitness. And for those reasons, I can see Josh King missing out this weekend. So I've had a few questions today with regards to Andy Robinson and whether he'll be involved. And I'm not really sure where these questions are coming from. Like I say, I've had quite a few. I suspect it may have been his absence from, again, the training ground photographs on Thursday, where he was one notable absentee along with the likes of Daniel Sturridge. You know, and I tend not to read too much into this. You know, there was certainly no mention during Friday's press conference by Jurgen Klopp that Andy Robinson, or Sturridge indeed for that matter, had been flagged as injury doubts. We all know that Joe Gomez is managing an ongoing Achilles problem. Jordan Henderson is coming off the back of a hamstring injury. Naby Keita as well from a hamstring problem, although he was named in the matchday squad in Belgrade midweek. So, you know, overall, it was a positive update from Jurgen Klopp. I think Alexander-Arnold, Gomez and Henderson have all been named in Gareth Southgate's upcoming England squad. But what Jurgen Klopp did say was, you know, these players are available for Liverpool at this point in time, but if there are any further issues, then he would take any matters up with Southgate direct, you know, and maybe look to withdraw them from the squad, and that maybe certainly is something which you may consider with Joe Gomez. Like I say, it's an ongoing Achilles problem. I'm not sure of the specifics. I suspect it's tendinitis, which tends to be you know, an overuse injury, and he'll benefit from the rest during the break. Arsenal progressed to the last 32 of the Europa League on Thursday night, but the 0-0 draw with Sporting was overshadowed by a horrendous injury to Danny Welbeck. The striker landed awkwardly and suffered what the club are calling a significant ankle injury, the specifics of which haven't been released, although they are due to provide an update probably within the next 48 to 72 hours. Now Welbeck is still in hospital at this moment in time, so we don't know what's going on. You know, that it looks like a break, potentially a dislocation, and you know, there's going to be a spell on the sidelines there. My initial reaction was it wasn't too dissimilar to the injury which Daniel Amartey suffered just a few weeks ago. And although again that looked pretty horrific in real time, the prognosis was actually quite good in the grand scheme of things. You know, the initial fears when something like that happens is, you know, the player's out for the season. But Amartey went down for surgery, which was you know, successful. And the club are hoping that he could maybe be back in March, you know, within around sort of a 4-month timeline. So, you know, if Welbeck was anything along those lines, you know, then that's the best you could hope for in this bad situation. Like I say, we just hope it's maybe not as bad as it looked on the TV cameras. But you know, Arsenal will be releasing something official very soon. Stefan Lichtsteiner is one that's been flagged as a doubt for Sunday. Officially, again, the club have released, you know, he'll be assessed ahead of the Wolves game. But what I would suggest, in my opinion and my experience of looking at these types of things, you know, the fullback stands no chance. He pulled up with what looked like quite a bad hamstring problem, and yeah, he might be being assessed officially, but I think that's just to determine the extent of anything. It's certainly not something which, again, personally, I don't think he can recover from within a matter of days. And the obvious thing would be to rest Lichtsteiner and, you know, ideally have him back for game week 13. Now there have been a lot of questions with regards to Nacho Monreal. Now he's been training with the group this week. He's been back on the training pitches, which is really good news. But Unai Emery, he's come out and he said, you know, I'm going to treat this one quite carefully. I'm not going to push him too hard because we don't want any setbacks. So the official line I come from there is he's been assessed, and we'll determine whether he's available for the match day squad probably on Saturday. The reality is, could he be involved? Yes. And that'll probably come down to maybe the other factors and other players being fit and available, and how Monreal can maybe slot in there. It could be that he's introduced to the match day squad and maybe he gets minutes from the bench to build those up, with a view, with maybe a behind closed doors game during the break, with a view to maybe he's potentially starting in game week 13, but we'll have to see on that one. So a quick roundup of a few other questions that have been fired through today. Joe Ralls, Cardiff City, he's available again after a 3-match ban. However, Neil Warnock did reveal that he chipped a bone in his knee at Tottenham, and he's only returned to training this week. Had a really tough session on Wednesday, and Neil Warnock was going to base a decision on his involvement to see how he reacted to that. Now, he said that Rails will be in the squad. It just comes down to whether he's going to start him or put him on the bench. So that's good news for Bluebirds fans. David Wagner basically said the Terriers have got a clean bill of health. Danny Williams, he's been struggling with an ongoing knee problem, a little bit of inflammation there for a couple of months now, but he's just recently rejoined the group, as has Eric Dern, groin problem. Now, both players do lack match fitness, so although they are available and physically, they are fit, they're just maybe not match fit and lack a little bit of sharpness, and therefore I feel both players this weekend's probably a little bit too soon for them, and they're likely to miss out. For Newcastle, first win on the board last weekend against Watford. Maybe after their first half performance rather fortuitous, but 3 enforced injuries within the space of 6 minutes either side of half time arguably changed the game. Ki Sung-young coming on for Shelvey. Now he put the ball in for Ayoze Perez, who replaced Mutu just before half time. And the chances are that both of those players, are going to be in the starting lineup and rewarded for that performance. It looks like Shelvey certainly hasn't got any chance whatsoever by all accounts, and Mutu's struggling with a calf problem. Now, the only other concern as well is with regards to the skipper, Jamal Lascelles. Now, he did take part in a light training session this week, but his problem relates to his shoulder. So there aren't any issues really with his running. It's the problem are going to be with contact, and he hasn't been able to take part in full contact sessions. And there are concerns, particularly when you look at maybe Callum Wilson. The type of player he is: strong, quick, physical. And in form. And what you don't want is somebody who maybe isn't 100%. To go up against somebody like Wilson in the form that he's in. So I think maybe Fabian Shaw could get the nod for Newcastle this weekend. And elsewhere, I think that's probably it. Burnley, there's a couple of concerns down there. It looks like Jack Cork will recover from an ankle sprain. He missed out last week, but looks like he's back in contention, as is Phil Bardsley, recovered from a hip flexor strain. One of the big questions marks comes with regards to James Tarkowski. He had a hernia op early in the summer. Looked to be doing okay, but it's been reported that he's been struggling for the last few weeks with niggling groin complaint. Now, he met with a specialist on Thursday, and it's one of those injuries that you can play on, but it depends on what the specialist has actually said, and whether it's the right move or the right call will be to go under surgery again to maybe tidy something up and potentially just rule him out for a short period of time, or whether he just sort of plays on and tries to manage that pain and hopefully doesn't exacerbate and make the problem worse. So that's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the Premier Injuries channel. We'll be back, myself and Johnny, with more videos throughout the week, particularly over the international break, where we'll be keeping you up to speed with some of the injuries that have been happening all over the world. Thanks again.